Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul.
About 25 years ago, I remember reading a story about the Dalai Lama. I heard the story that he was staying at the Ritz-Carlton in New York City. And on his first morning, when he stepped out of his hotel room with a little bit of his entourage with him of other monks, there was a housekeeper out there in the hallway doing her thing, and he stopped, sort of nodded to her, bowed, and said a few words, and then moved on. The next morning, when he came out of his room, there were now 3 housekeepers in the hallway, supposedly to clean, but they'd obviously been waiting there for him. And like the morning before, he stopped and he bowed to each one and he said a few words and he moved on. By the 3rd morning, the entire hallway was filled with staff members of the Ritz-Carlton and even some of their families, all lined up to greet the Dalai Lama. And each time he stopped and he bowed and said a few words before he moved on. Now the reporter who heard about this went to the staff and asked them, so what was going on here? I mean, this is the Ritz-Carlton, you've had celebrities here before, what's going on? And they said, we don't know how to express it, but you just understand when you're in his presence, there's something so healing. There's so much love and acceptance. You just want to be there. And that's why they had lined up. Now, I read this story about 25 years ago, and quite frankly, I didn't really believe it. I mean, I thought, oh, okay, he's just a celebrity, and he's a special celebrity or something like that, and that maybe this story was a little exaggerated to make a point that yes, the Dalai Lama, he's a holy man, that kind of thing. But then I encountered my own holy person in the most unlikely of places. So a friend of mine, this is her, Lee, she and I were colleagues back when I worked as a recruiter many, many years ago. And she owned a Harley, as you can see there. Now, I have to, a little bit of a confession, I love Harleys. I just think they're so cool. I think they're so much fun. And I remember when I told her this, she said, well, why don't you come down to Baltimore? I was living in Boston at the time. Come down to Baltimore and go on a drive with me and my group that we go out on our Harleys and go driving most weekends. Now, and I knew that this group was all 12-step program people, that people who came out of AA. She herself was out of Overeaters Anonymous, and there's NA, Narcotics Anonymous people, that kind of thing. So it was all these AA people, 12-step recovery people. I didn't realize, though, that a lot of them, actually all of them there, with the exception of Lee and I, were also ex-motorcycle gang members. So the Pagans and the Hells Angels. So here's a picture, and yes, that is me, about 20 years ago, all dressed in leather. with the guy that I was assigned to ride with, and his name was Hedgehog. They all had, call signs of some sort, right? I can't remember what Lee's was, but this was Hedgehog. And he was a very nice guy, perfect gentleman, really lovely guy. So, anyway, so I met up with Hedgehog, and Lee and Hedgehog and I and a few others drove out. We were going out to the country, so we're going to go pick up this guy named Q, which, by the way, I don't have a picture of Q because one of my great regrets in life, I didn't get a picture of him. But anyway, we pulled up to Q's house, and he came outside ready to get on his bike with his wife, and he greeted me with a friendly, genuine smile, shook my hand, and that's when I felt it. This presence of being in this person's presence was strange. It was just like you immediately relaxed, and you felt this acceptance and love from him. It was the strangest thing. I think I was like, it was really kind of strange. I never felt anything like it before. And I noticed how everyone treated him very deferentially in subtle ways. It wasn't like everybody was bowing or anything like that, but they deferred to him, not in a scared way, but in this way of being sort of reverent of him. And everybody acted so well, so kind to one another. There was no roughhousing or teasing that you would kind of expect from these big tough guys, right? He brought out the best in people. It was just sort of a slightly surreal experience. And these were really tough dudes, right? And I remember, so these guys, right, they've got tattoos and leather, and they've had these hard lives and everything like that. And then Q would say, so shall we stop by the side of the road and have a prayer? Like, okay, and everybody would. And it was just amazing. And you didn't feel like he was pushing on anybody, or it was just love and acceptance in everything that he did. Was really kind of amazing. And I realized maybe that story about the Dalai Lama was true. And maybe that's why people like Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha had such an impact, because just being around them in their presence, they brought out the best in people. I'm wondering, these people are pretty rare. Has anybody ever encountered someone like that in your life? I see a few hands going up. I know someone in this congregation who I think is like that, but I won't say who. But anyway, it got me thinking then about this idea of a soul, right? Do we have something that emanates from us, like an energy or a light, as some people say, that gives other people a sense of who we are? And do we subconsciously somehow kind of pick this up? And is that what our soul is? I think people have been trying to prove or disprove the idea of a soul for a very long time. Many religions, of course, say that, of course, we do have a soul, right? That's what they're trying to save, is our eternal soul. They think of it as eternal. It got to, that goes on, leads off into heaven. And is, in those cases, the soul seems to be something more like our personality, right? Because there seems to be an indication, at least our memories and our relationships go with us up into heaven and live in this idealized afterlife. In Hinduism, the soul is called the Atman, and it's reborn in reincarnation, trying to enlighten itself. And Buddhists are complicated. They kind of, I'm not even going to go with Buddhists. They're very complicated. But anyway, I tried to figure out how I could put it in short words, but I couldn't. Anyway, and then of course there's atheists, right, who say, no, there's no soul, right? Nothing about a person that lives on, there's no afterlife. And for others, there might be something kind of in between, something that is eternal, but maybe not our memories. So what is the soul? I've been trying to define what the soul is for a long time. I think we all have. I think that in history and religions, in fact, that's part of what we've been trying to do, to understand God, understand what our relationship is, and so we have to understand what a soul is. And in the Hebrew scriptures, which is some of our oldest texts, the word for soul is nephesh. But it's translated into English with 28 different words. Okay, because it's such a big word, and it in different contexts and things like that. So it can refer to a person, it can refer to their mind, it can refer to the wind, it can refer to breath, or it can to a non-physical being like an angel or even God or spirit. It seems that the Jews were also a little confused about what exactly this is and trying to figure it out. And I'm not sure that the soul is the breath or wind, though I can understand how that might be construed, right? You breathe in, hey, you're living. You stop breathing, you're no longer living. I can understand why people might think that that is something that sounds like the soul. Well, as many of you also know that I'm a shamanic practitioner. I don't talk about this that much because I get that's a little bit out there, but today you're going to get a little bit of out there, Sean. Okay? So they have a model for the soul that kind of works for me. Because they distinguish between the soul and spirit. Those are two different things. The soul in the shamanic worldview is unique to each of us. It is, in a sense, like our personality. It is, to a certain extent, the energy that we give off. And it's formed due to our experiences, our memories, our interactions, genetic material, you name it. But it, in and of itself, is not eternal. But we also have spirit, a spirit that is connected to spirit that is capital S. We are, in a sense, spirit's offspring. And that influences our personality. Our spirit is the internal part of us, and it goes on, even after death. It is the energetic force of all nature and of which we are a part. And it's connected to our soul. That's why I love that song that we just sang, right? Return to the home of our soul. For me, that is spirit. And while our personality can change, our spirit doesn't. Spirit is eternal because it's connected to that which is eternal. So I've been trying to find a model to explain how I kind of think about this. And again, you don't have to take in any of this, but there's a reason why I'm explaining this to you. I'll get there. So most people, when they think of a model, you can see this all over the internet. We have a body, a soul, and a spirit, and they're kind of somehow connected. But that one just doesn't work to me. So I have kind of a different model that I like. Because I believe that we're both separate and connected with spirit. That spirit feeds us and we feed it. So here's my model. And I believe that spirit encourages us, invites us to grow, to become closer to it. And the wider we can make that connection, the closer we become to spirit. And we also inform or teach spirit as well. You know, Carl Sagan himself, he posited that humanity is part of the universe trying to figure itself out. And he's suggesting something that's called process theology. Process theology suggests that God or spirit is continually growing and learning, and that we, humanity, are part of that consciousness trying to understand itself. And when I study religion, that makes sense to me because I feel like every religion has been about humanity trying to understand the relationship with something greater than ourselves. It notices that there's something going on out there, but has no words for it, what I might call spirit. Another way to look at this, there are times in our lives, whether or not you've met a holy person, when we feel at our best, right? I know that each one of you have had those moments when you feel open, non-judgmental, not even analytical, just open, compassionate, connected. When we simply love. And it comes out in all sorts of ways, in gratitude, love, hope, joy. When we listen to one another, when we feel compassion, when we love a child, when we laugh with our loved ones. That is when we've opened that passage to spirit. And we tap into that part of ourselves that is holy. And of course, I believe that we are all connected to spirit. Right? When we love one another, when we treat one another kindly with compassion, and when we're listening, the bridge we create, at least energetically, is in part through spirit. When I talk about love, this is how I imagine it kind of working. When I say God is love, spirit is love, it's the active energy that binds us all together. And if we don't love, we cut ourselves off, not only from each other, but from spirit. And the problem for humanity is that when our soul gets hurt, when it gets damaged by whatever trauma that happens in our lives, it can shut down that connection to spirit. The flow between them goes down to kind of a trickle, to something like this. When we shut ourselves off from other people, from love, from connection, spirit or love can't get through. And for me, evil is what happens when we block ourselves off entirely from spirit. It's when we don't see the connections between all of us and we dehumanize others. And that holy person might look a little bit more like this. They're close to Spirit. They exude love and acceptance. And this is also what each of us looks like when we are our best selves. When we are loving, open, calm, curious, kind, and compassionate. And each of us notices it when we're in that state or when we're around someone who is in that state. Like an energy or a light comes from that person. In fact, I think that's why people came up with the idea of halos, right? Almost every religion has this idea that holy people glow. That there's this inner light when they're connected to Spirit. So, okay, why am I getting all so theological on you today? And by the way, you don't have to believe any of this. This is Sean's theory. Okay, this is me trying to articulate to you all some of where I'm coming from. You can have your own theories about how this works for you. So why tell you all this? Because this month, in August, we're exploring this idea of Sabbath. And I think it's important to understand what Sabbath is and what it's not. Some people think of the Sabbath as a day of rest, right? And it can definitely be restful, okay, and relaxing. In fact, I hope it is. But it's not just about sleeping in all day, or escaping to binge on Netflix, and skip out on responsibilities, which is, quite frankly, often what I do on my day off. But that's actually not a Sabbath. I think we can learn something from our friends, the Orthodox Jews. Because the Sabbath is about taking care of our soul, about connecting to Spirit, something deeper. Sabbath or Shabbat is a day to widen that connection with Spirit. In the Jewish tradition, Sabbath is often called the Shabbat Queen, right? It's personified as a beautiful bride who's coming to visit. And so you put on your finest clothes, you clean up your house beforehand, you lay out your finest china. A friend of mine once put it this way. Here's a modern way of putting the Shabbat Queen. Imagine that Michelle Obama is coming to visit. Right? Shabbat is meant to be a celebration and opening up to the light within all of us. And so on the Sabbath, we do those things that help open us up to Spirit. We might spend time laughing with family and friends, spending time in nature, going to church, and being reminded of our holy selves, making connections. And it's spending time reflecting or praying or meditating, depending on your tradition or what you believe, about who we want to be as individuals, as a people, as a nation. And how do we access that higher self of ours, that person that we know inside of us that just, we feel so good when we're there, and that connection to Spirit. The Sabbath was created as a day set apart from other days by the Jewish people, but almost every religion suggests something similar. And it doesn't have to be Sunday or Saturday. It doesn't have to be a day. It can be an hour, it can be a week or a month. That's what sabbaticals comes off the same word for Sabbath. It's the idea. It's whatever time you decide you want to spend in celebration, in gratitude, and in love with those around you. The problem is that in this society, unless you're an Orthodox Jew, we tend not to value the Sabbath, right? It's often used as a time to run errands, clean up the house, binge on Netflix, go shopping online. And don't get me wrong, there are times and places for that, to just relax the mind and everything like that. But the Sabbath is a little bit different. I think it's what we try to do here in church. To be in church here is to invite people to their best self, to connect with something greater than themselves. And my prayer is always that people feel invited to go into the Sabbath deeply in whatever shape it comes to them. But it does take some intention to do that. It takes intention to come to church. That's why it's a spiritual practice. It takes intention to go deeper into the subjects and ideas that I offer here on Sunday. And it takes intention to arrange to spend time on the Sabbath, whatever form that takes. Sometimes, like in our story, you have to choose to put down the distracting toys and games and internet and learn to listen and connect with those around you and the world around you. So this month we're exploring this idea of Sabbath, and I invite you to be intentional about how you can celebrate it. To be intentional about spending time without distractions, with family and with friends. To be intentional about opening yourself to love and connections to the world around you. You know, as I've said it before, I believe that church is where we learn to love better. That's the role of Sabbath, too, to give us time to open our hearts to Spirit, to love. And throughout all religions, these holy people, the ones who learn to love deeply, as I said, you know, they're depicted with this light that shines forth from them. I've seen lights here in people here when they talk about their passions, when they talk about their families. I think that the more we connect to love and open our hearts, then our light shines out so bright. People can't help but feel it. So let your light shine. Blessed be and amen. Please rise and body your spirit as we sing.